Thanks for listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. 1 hour of tips from experts and real stories from people just like you. For those thinking about what lies ahead, for those going through the job search, and those who have paved the way to their next career after the military. These professionals are dedicated to helping you move forward successfully to the next phase of your career after the military. Welcome to Exchange.
Well, hello there. Welcome back. I'm Cheryl Cross, your host, and you're listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. Such a mouthful. I got to come up with a different name. But this guy has a short name and he's been out just a short time. This is the segment that we talk to people who are within their first year of transition into the civilian market, and he's been out all of 6 days. No, I'm joking. He's in his first year. I'd like to introduce you to David Katz, former U.S. Army and a friend. Hi, David. Welcome, and thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Cheryl. Thanks. And it is exactly 6 days today. I got 6 days ago, I got my new ID card.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Really. So you and I, we've been chatting for a while, over a year and a half. You were pretty forward thinking and reaching out to me as a recruiter and somebody who is in the recruiting world to kind of ask questions. Would you talk to me a little bit about how you prepared for that? And then we'll jump into how your experience is going so far.
I think I started out the same way everybody else does. I went on LinkedIn and got my free year premium, at the urging of a lot of friends and peers that had gotten out just before I had. And I just started reaching out to random people and trying to build as much of a network as I could in Hawaii, right? And so I think the tendency with LinkedIn is that you build your network with the people that you know first, and then kind of see what they're up to, what businesses they're following, and the typical trajectory of most people when they leave the military, right? And so I fell for it just like everybody else falls for it, because you don't know what else to think when you're getting out of the military except what everybody else thinks, because that's what you've been doing for so long. Yeah, I just did what everybody else did. I started following the same people that everybody else follows on LinkedIn in that, mil to civ transition space. Yeah, you just follow the same people and you start getting those pieces of advice and take the ones that you think are applicable to you and dump the stuff that's not. And then as you start using that platform more and getting more practice with it and having these kind of informational interviews, you start to refine what it is you're actually looking for versus what everybody else thinks you should be doing. So.
Hey, how did you reach out to people and get those informational interviews? What was your approach?
Always at the urging of one of my peers was just sending a message, hey, I'm a transitioning service member. No idea what I want to be when I grow up. I know that I want to stay in Hawaii. And I ended up reaching out to a lot of different people from different industries and just saying, hey, do you have time for 30 minutes? Would it be okay for me to take 30 minutes of your time? I'll buy you lunch. I'll buy you a cup of coffee, whatever it is. And most people were very receptive to it, surprisingly so. And even more than not just transitioning military guys and girls, but people that had been out, people that had no direct connection to service whatsoever, just said, hey, no problem. I have no problem, talking to you about my trajectory, business owners locally, things like that. Just people that were kind enough to take the time out of their days to do it,
Mm-hmm. How much time did you put into reaching out to these folks?
More than I probably should have. I think I was a lot more stressed out than I should have been about the whole thing. I admit fully that, because now that I'm officially out of the military, the amount of man hours that I put into this thing greatly surpassed the amount of time I was spending on military type things for my last, 12 to 15 months in service. And so for a while there, this was my only job. My only job was transitioning, so I was able to position myself well in that, my last 6 months or so, I really had nothing to do. And this was my full-time gig, was just finding out and figuring out what I was going to do next. So I was dabbling at first and then became full-time.
Getting a job is a full-time job. It really is. And people say that and it's like, yeah, whatever. I know some people, I feel hopeful and no, it's an 8-hour a day thing. And if you have a job that you're trying to leave and you're trying to get a job, how many hours are in the day? You have children, you have a wife, husband, you've got family, you've got things to do. It's stressful even for those of us who are in that world. I want to say that you've anchored yourself into one thing that I didn't see a lot of, and that is location. So you and your family decided that you are staying in Hawaii. You left the service in Hawaii. Were you at Schofield or were you at Shafter?
I was on Wheeler, so right across from Schofield. Yeah.
You're interesting, David, because you were very anchored in staying in Hawaii. And I know folks that are listening are also wondering if they should pick a place and then do research or do research and then see what that place, that company, or those companies or those industries offer. So you were pretty rooted from our conversations way back when that your family was wanting to stay here. And that probably limited, here being Hawaii, that may have limited you on your career options. Talk to me about that and how you navigated that.
Early on in the process, people were telling me it's the what do you want to do? It's the where do you want to be? And it's the why. What's your why? I don't really understand what my why is yet. I'm getting there. I'm still refining that as we speak. But between those three questions, I knew the where immediately. As soon as I decided that I was going to retire from the Army, I kind of came home and I told my family, I said, hey, I got this number for the Sergeant Major list and I'm really not interested in being promoted again. What do you guys think? And they all said, finally, he came to it on his own. We didn't have to just outright tell him. And I said, so, okay, well, if I'm retiring, where do you guys want to be? And right now I have a 16 and a 14-year-old, and they both said, we don't want to move again. And my wife, who is a very avid hiker in Hawaii, she's like, I don't really want to move again either. I love it here. We've always wanted to be in Hawaii, so let's just ride this as long as we possibly can. And so I said, okay, that's it. That's my primary driving motivation at this point. And then I'll just make the rest of it fit around that, right? And I'll just figure it out. And so initially when I started doing all of this, and I said, I had a number of different coaches that throughout this process, there are a couple of different great nonprofits, and they all kind of agreed, unanimously that I was not going to be able to find something in Hawaii, that it was not going to be suitable level of income. It was not going to be easy for me to do this. Or I could just go be a government contractor. And so, if I wanted to be a government contractor, this would be great. You're either in the hospitality industry, you're a government contractor, or that's pretty much it. Those are the two big ones here.
GS.
Tourism, and contractors, mm-hmm. Right? And so if it wasn't going to be one of those two things, then I was just out of luck and I was going to have to go back to the States. Maybe I should look at remote opportunities, mm-hmm. hybrid to the West Coast, things like that. But at the same time, I was completely wide open because that was one of the biggest pieces of advice that someone had given me. Stay as wide open as possible so that you don't limit yourself.
What was your MOS? What was it you did this last few years?
So I was a helicopter flight engineer by trade, a 15 uniform, but I was a first sergeant most recently for the last 5.5 years. I was basically just an administrator for different aviation companies.
So the thing that I hear over and over from all of you is, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. The trouble is translating skills that you can do into what the folks hiring for those jobs understand. How did you make that transition? Did you walk into conversations saying, this is what I did, and they're looking at you like, but we don't have those jobs? What did you do?
One of the biggest pieces of advice that I was given was to have kind of some stories on standby so that you're prepared for interview questions, right? And so I was given a piece of advice to have sort of 4 peak performance moments in my career, 4 to 6 even peak performance moments in my career that I could then tap into and share stories at a later time when asked questions during interviews. And so happily, coincidentally, I should say, Bear has the life values: leadership, integrity, flexibility, and efficiency, right? Which are just like the Army values. They're just like every core value that we all stand for, depending on what branch you're in. And so I had my 4 little stories on top of my computer screen, my 4 little peak performance moments. They asked me a question or two from each of those 4 sections, and I just, all right, here's what I think. And it was funny because I actually pretended to think about it. I'm like, I was looking at the top of my computer at my Post-it notes. I was like, that's a great question, Joe. I would say, oh yeah, there was this one time, and hopefully I wasn't pointing at the Post-it note, but
They don't know. They
yeah,
don't know.
they don't know. Maybe, let's see. And so I was pretending to think about it. And then in conversations since the interview, and kind of since starting work here, my boss is like, that was one of the greatest interviews. So easy. You were an easy choice. We had 3 other people that were interviewing for that position, and you were like the clear victor in that interview process because of your answers.
So by pre-gaming it and having a lot of thought and being prepared, it sounds like this is a common theme for everyone coming out of the military. I worked with a company that talked about training. It was a hazmat training company, and the motto was, "Let no man's ghost return to tell you their training failed." Training is something that you all do all the time, and I think employers need to understand that this is just sort of the rigmarole, that you being prepared is a daily need in any branch of the military.
Right.
So thanks for pointing that out. Stories on standby. I like that. Can you give us an example of a story? And I think what you're talking about is when somebody asks you, what did you do then? Those are called behavioral based questions. And as
Right.
a recruiter, I hate them. I just hate them. They're designed to walk you in a corner. The people that designed them 110 years ago don't say that. They say, well, we just want to see how flexible and fungible and agile these people are. And if they can't come up with an answer, what do you do then?
Right.
I believe interviews should be get to know you, understand who you are, find some common ground, and then talk about the job. But I'm a very different type of recruiter. So let me put you on the spot. Give me a time, Dave. Give me a time where you were faced with a monumental decision that your leadership you knew wouldn't buy in on. What did you do, and what was the outcome?
Absolutely. So the situation right at the beginning of COVID is that we were tasked with going to Thailand for an international training exercise where we were going to be training with the Thais. We're going to be training with multinational forces across the country for a period of up to, I think the initial one was 6 weeks that we were supposed to be there for, 6 to 8 weeks in Thailand. Basically, the action that happened, COVID went haywire right as we got there. They sent us on the airplane with 2 paper masks and said, hey, you're going to need these. And everybody kind of just made fun of it. Hey, we're not going to need this. We're not going to wear these masks. This is silly. And then COVID went crazy and it became a real thing. And so what we were tasked with was deciding whether or not to wrap up the international training exercise, keeping in mind that, the Pacific area of operations, it's very important that, we save face in relation to these other countries. Who's a bigger superpower? Is it us or China? These huge level decisions, right? And I was serving as a sergeant major for an aviation task force. We had to make the determination to wrap up that exercise quickly and get home because all the spouses were freaking out. This is back when we were, Lysol wiping groceries before we put them on the counter. And meanwhile, their husbands were sleeping in tents and, using porta potties, and our sinks were actually outside on a polo field or something. So there were, piles of horse manure outside while we were brushing our teeth. So everyone was kind of freaking out about the fact that we were out and doing this thing. And so I was tasked with kind of giving my recommendation of these very high level leaders that would be unpopular, but necessary, that it was just time to wrap things up and get home and get safe and make sure people were protected. And then the result from that was basically that no one got sick from the entire aviation task force. We all got home safely. We're all able to, resume operations in a very uncertain time.
And were you able to help our partner nation in achieving their goals?
Sort of. They didn't really want to talk to us during COVID. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of kind of upheaval at the time. And so we sort of worked with them. And then at a certain point, they kind of spaced and took some space from us. And we spaced ourselves out from them as well because everybody was panicking. They didn't know what was going on. So, yeah.
Well, that's an excellent answer. I just walked you in the corner, and no, I did not prepare him for this, by the way.
That was a terrible answer. That was a terrible answer. I was like,
That's the other thing. Everybody thinks that, you'll be thinking about these answers at 4 o'clock in the morning. They are
No.
designed to keep you agile and fungible and open and flexible. And also, I just want to say to the folks listening, as a recruiter, if somebody's trying to walk you into a corner and trick you, that's a gut to tell you that company might not be the right fit for you. We're over that time where we have so many qualified people that we have to trick them when we get them on the phone. So as a recruiter, I give you a hall pass to say, yeah, that did not fit me, and I'm going to move on and find someplace that fits.
Right.
So thanks for letting me explore that and
Sure.
stick you in a corner there,
Yeah,
boss.
no problem. I think the biggest key with the stories, Cheryl, someone recommended, and this is a common thread, is you stop considering yourself as a we and you move to an I, right? So we didn't do this. We didn't get stuck with this situation. We didn't determine that this was the best course of action. You have to start saying I again. I decided, I talked to these people, I spoke to so and so that determined that this was a better course of action, whatever it was, right? And so that's a very difficult thing to do when you leave the military, is to say I had these conversations and I made this determination. It wasn't my decision. I was a first sergeant. This is like a multi star flag officer that's making this determination. But I was able to provide my viewpoint to those people in order to, get the desired outcome, my desired outcome anyway.
Thanks for sharing that story. And you're an excellent person to talk to. I know even though you're 6 days as a retiree, you have been in your terminal leave and working for a company for the last several months, which is unusual. That didn't work in the environment I was in because we had best practice not to do that. I like that you were employed during your terminal leave and you were able to seek employment that was local and satisfy your family's desires so that you can stay in Hawaii. And now that we wrap this segment up, I'm definitely keeping my eyes on you. And I'm going to be checking in with you because we talk a lot. You've been showing up on the LinkedIn audios. Thank you so much. And sharing your story and asking questions and helping those who are trying to figure this out for themselves. How might someone get a hold of you through LinkedIn? Can you spell your name for us?
I believe my LinkedIn URL is just David Joseph Katz. So it's DavidJosephKatz. One, no block, no hyphens or anything like that. Just one long block, David Joseph Katz. And then they can reach out to me that way. It's the best way to do it. And I'm happy to connect with them.
Yeah, you're open to mentoring. You've been a great help to some folks already. I think you had a conversation with somebody just recently who was 4 years out, which is a great amount of time. Yay. Cheryl's book is 3-year guide. Be 3 years out. Yay, we need to get him the book. So continue doing what you're doing in the workspaces, and also for the veterans who are soon to be. Congratulations on your 6 days.
It's been a long 6 days, to be fair.
Tell me why
Yeah.
tell me why it's been a long 6 days. Tell me what's going on.
And then my limitless experience in corporate America. It's been a long 6 days.
He's a joker. All right. We're going to sign off now. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. This is our 1 year vet, not even 6 days in, but within the first year of his civilian transition, David Katz. David, thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate you.
And we're back. Hi, I'm Cheryl Cross. I'm your host of the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. And this is our expert segment. I'm super excited to bring you not only a colleague, but somebody who's in the recruiting and resume writing space and has been for a while. Her name is Brittney Swan, and she is with Swan Inc. Hey, Brittney, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We were talking before we hit the record button on what we want to cover in this segment, and you brought up ageism. That this is something you speak as a LinkedIn top voice across all of your work that you've done up in Northern California and the U.S., including Hawaii, which is nice to know. That's where I sit. So
Yeah.
why don't you go ahead and launch on what are some of the trends that you're seeing in this world, and how do you speak to candidates so that they're a little bit more target hardened for ageism in the corporate or civilian workplace?
Yeah, well, a lot of kind of trends that I've been seeing is with feedback. And I do see things on LinkedIn and other search sites saying, like, don't age yourself, or recruiters will try to find out how old you are. And that's really not the case. That's not really what we're doing. So for ageism, there are a couple of aspects that we need to highlight. And one of those is, what is ageism? And that is the fact that you cannot do your job based on your age. And what that means is, based on your age, you're not going to be able to learn new technologies. You're not going to be able to lead a team professionally or efficiently because you can't get along with them or have the same structure of ideologies. There's a fear that you won't stay a long time because you're going to retire. So there is a whole bunch of fluff around ageism that actually don't really correspond with real life. Or if they do, there are ways that you can kind of navigate through that based on your own experience and highlighting certain things first.
So somebody comes out of the military with, say, 25 years of experience. So they're in their 40s to heading
Yeah.
into their 50s. What would you say to that person if they came to you and said, I'm really worried about my age. I'm really worried how I'm going to be perceived and folks' biases?
I would say let's focus on what you do have and not what you might be scared of. So, a lot of people will say, well, they ask for dates on applications. So, there's no way for me to mitigate them finding out my age, especially if it's on college and things like that. Really great feedback. However, when we're looking at the years of experience or trying to figure out where your graduation date lies, it is because usually of OFCCP or job description mandates. So if I need to make sure that this candidate has at least 10 years of experience in military communications, I do need to look at the bottom of your resume to do the math. If your experience isn't showing like up at the top, like I have 10 plus years of doing this. So a lot of people ask, why is it asking me for dates? And it's just to make sure that you are corresponding with those mandates.
Another thing that you brought up, and I love, you talk about OFCCP, which is more in my wheelhouse with DoD
Mhm.
recruiting. It is so important that your dates are accurate on your resume because background investigators are also using this as a document of truth, is what I call it. So really do
Yes.
your research. I know for my audience coming out of the military, that might not be as difficult, but for those of you who have been out of the service for a few years in the civilian workforce, make sure you check your dates. So, Brittney, in ageism, there's inherent biases, and this is something we can talk about all day long. So, why don't you go ahead and talk about what bias is and how that lives in the civilian workforce?
Yeah, I mean, going back to even, especially in military, we think about certain tools and processes and technologies. And when you get into a certain age, they think again that you will have a harder time learning these things. So if you don't have certain applications or technologies on your job description, it could be a subconscious bias of like, oh my gosh, the training cost, or will this person be able to learn it based on someone else that already has it on there? There's also educational bias. I see that a lot outside of OFCCP. Sometimes companies will just want to mandate certain educational degrees just because they want a higher level of talent, not realizing that the degree is in cosmetology and the person with 15 years of experience will do a better job. So there is tons of bias around age. That includes technologies, that includes age of years of employment. Even with your teams, if you have only been in a senior level team, how are you going to be more hands-on with someone who is 18 years old when you've been working with people on a senior level or C-level basis? So if you're going into civilian life, that bias already of like your connection and your communication piece is definitely going to be on the forefront of the brains.
And it's impossible for those of you listening for you to really know if you were biased out. If you were not selected because of someone's bias, it's impossible to know. But, we can do everything we can on my side to teach corporations and companies how not to have bias. There's some really interesting things going on in those workforces. I've seen resumes, they scrub the name, or they'll put the first initial or the second initial, first name, second initial. They're not putting last names. They're certainly not putting locations or addresses. They're trying to remove any inherent biases that the hiring team may have, the recruiting team may have as well. And I think it's a valiant effort on corporations' part to make things an even playing ground. But with bias, let's really unpack that a little bit more. What if how would you counsel someone who came back to you and said, Brittney, I really felt that I was not just discriminated on, but there was huge bias in my interview. Give us some of the things that maybe you've heard from clients, and I'll think of some too.
That they assumed they were uneducated by the city that they lived in. That they had a year gap in their workforce, so they thought they were passed over for a large gap. And I do want to be very clear that that's not considered a gap usually
No.
in most industries. For gaps, again, that kind of goes back to ageism, but the gap is so big that you have to relearn your job, or you're not familiar with the current trends or market asking. So don't worry about those gaps. That's another bias that I've heard a lot is my gaps. And I look at this, I'm like, there's no gap. There's zero gap. Your 6 months is not a gap. Maybe in
True.
your revenue, your
Mm-hmm.
income, but
Yeah.
not on your skills.
Yeah, gaps would probably be 1 or more years. And what I see a lot more is took a family break to take care for a family member. Military spouses, this community, family dependents, they're moving so much. So I'd say the average PCS is about 2 to 3 years, sometimes 5. So they're moving around a lot. And military spouses go through this daily. It's terrifying for them to come into a job interview sometimes. I've had them cry in front of me. Please don't judge me for my gaps. Well, if you're in some weird location and your degree is in this, and there's no remote work available, you're going to have to go volunteer on base doing this thing. Let's talk that, because how would you take someone like that, a military spouse, who's had all of these, I don't want to say jumps, but has moved around, and you see 2 years here, 1 year here, this type of employment timeline that shows to the general workforce that they're not loyal. So we as recruiters look at that and go, oh, they're not, they don't stick around, not knowing that they're a military spouse. How would you address that for a client? How would you teach them to maybe bring that into their language so they can represent themselves better?
Well, I would definitely ask a couple of questions. Like if you were in a temp location to begin with, you could definitely put on your document or in communication, this was a temporary job base because we were going to be moving. So it's not that the thing about having too many jobs is if you're getting fired or you're voluntarily leaving. If you're saying, I moved from job to job because our job was, I was the military spouse, was to do that. As a recruiter in this space, that is definitely not something that I would ever see as bias. I'd be like, okay, what types of jobs have they had? Do they have cross-functional experience? Like, did you work in a library and then an office and then logistics? Like, and then, okay, so you're cross-functional and you've been able to show me that you've been able to learn new jobs and new aspects or new environments every time you've moved. On your resume, you could put temporary, you could put military leave, you could put contract if you knew that you're only going to be there for 6 months. So there's ways to show that you weren't just quitting or getting replaced because of performance.
And that's it exactly. Thank you. Progression. You talked about progression.
Yes.
If we see that you have, and it doesn't always have to be upward, if you see somebody, like you said, that has a progressive career that makes sense. What's most concerning, and it's difficult for the military spouses, but for those of you getting out of the military and then going into civilian careers, the stats are pretty high. You're going to leave your first job probably in the first year. This is a number that has stayed unchanged for 20 some odd years. I don't
True.
think I don't think I'm going to fix it. But be it that it was a bad fit, or you had a change of heart, or you didn't do your research in advance. By the way, my book, Civilian Mission, the 3-year guide for military professionals planning civilian careers, gets you ahead of that. So my small contribution to this workforce is to say, do your research, do your homework. But if you are rounding the curve in your last year and you're like, I got to get a job, what would be the best way for them, let's say, to start? Do they hire a resume writer? Do they get a career coach? Do they throw 1,000 resumes out there? What do you suggest?
I would suggest using your free tools first. So I know the military and some certain bases, they have great career programs and they have great placement programs and they have great partnerships. So depending on what station and where you're located, check that out first. And then your city and state also gives free tools, free job seeking advice, all of that stuff. Now, if that's not working or you want something more, just go on to LinkedIn, start adding real recruiters within military recruiters and start following them, and you can start seeing advice. However, what I would say, if you know in the next year or 6 months that you are definitely going to have to look for a job, start thinking, what companies or things do I enjoy now? So if you're like, oh my God, I would, right now I'm in loss prevention. I would love to join Disney in loss prevention. They hire military out of the gate constantly. I've worked for Disney. It's one of the first people they use for loss prevention, either internally or externally. And what I have to say about that is, when you're focusing on like, okay, what would I like to join? You can start adding yourself to those companies or following those companies. And then in that company's type recruiter, look up the recruiters and hiring managers in your field in that company and start adding them. So when a position does open up or when you are ready to apply, you're already connected, you're already following, but you're also getting that generation of jobs that they have opening up in the meantime. And you can set up alerts. But the one thing is that you talk about in your book is the research piece. And I know a lot of people like roll their eyes at that and they're like, I don't really have time, or I don't even know where to start with that. So the research piece is within first. What do I like about my job? Is it the people piece? Is it communication? Is it paperwork? Is it admin? Is it operations? Is it team growth? Is it recruitment? Is it budgets? Is it financial? Is it loss prevention? Is it cybersecurity? Whatever you're doing, then you can say like, okay, now let me research the top 10 companies hiring out of military in cybersecurity. Boom, these are the top 10 companies. Which ones are mandated by OFCCT probably will mandate on what industry you go to. So if you go through the military and you end up not having a bachelor's or a degree or something like that, you can use your educational credits and courses and all that stuff that you took from your military. But there's also free things outside your military like Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, where you could just take free courses on Six Sigma, agile methodologies, customer service, communications, and you can put those on your resume as certified LinkedIn courses. So that helps out a lot of the military too when they're trying to transition into industries that they don't have a lot of experience in. They can say, well, I'm certified on Salesforce through LinkedIn, and they
Yeah.
know the basic fundamentals. So utilizing the internal first kind of helps you with that path of like, okay, I want to be in cybersecurity. This is my next step that I need to do in order to make sure I am looking great on a civilian point and a transferability from military point.
Those certifications are essential. I'm going to take a pause and let you know that Jay Salters is a current Navy officer. He's created a wonderful foundation called Act Now Education. And his goal, he doesn't get out of the military until 2027. His goal is to put 1,000 people in tech jobs. So there are certifications up the yang that these folks can take advantage of. So, like you said earlier, there's just a lot of resources out there. There's a lot to choose from. But the goal here, and what Brittney's telling you, is use that time to not only figure out what you want, what are your skills and interests, underline interests, because there might be something you did 10 years ago in the military that you want to refresh. Do that through certifications and just put your nose to the grindstone, because recruiters love that. I would look at certifications before I'd look at education. If my job description needed a bachelor's degree, then I have to bypass somebody who had an associate's degree. But if they have the certs and I knew that they had maybe 8 years of experience, I would go to that hiring manager and say, 8 years of experience, no degree, and the cert. And there we are, because sometimes the government, I was working in DOD, sometimes the government will take that. It just depends. It depends on how the contract's written. So thanks for bringing that up. Brittney, what's your biggest pet peeve? And you wish, if you had a magic wand in the recruiting world, if you had a magic wand, what would you fix?
I would fix the communication and pipelining piece between job seekers and hiring managers. And I mean that, like, if you don't know where to start and you're just messaging me saying like, hey, let me know if you have anything for me. And now I'm sitting looking at your resume going, where do they want to be? I don't know their personal likes, dislikes. You have so much cross functionality in here. I don't even know where I could place you unless you tell me I am looking for this type of role. I'm looking to translate these skills into this type of environment or this type of company. Give me something. But when you just hand me a resume and say, let me know what you have, I'm going to be like,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about you, and I probably don't.
Yeah. And you've not done your research. Come
Yeah.
on. It's so
I
true.
can't put you in front of the hiring manager with, let me know what you got. Like, I just
Yeah.
can't. I can't
Right?
do that.
No. Thank you for saying that out loud. It's so true. I would
Uh,
put that in my top list. And I also think that, especially for the military, timing is of the essence. I've had people come to, job fairs and say, I don't like your company because you always reject me. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And you look them up in what we call our applicant tracking system. And, they've had a few rejection letters. Either they're not applying for the right jobs, or one gentleman, come to find out, wasn't even available for a year. I'm like, dude, why are you applying right now? What part of TAPS did you not listen to? So application timeline is very important. It's
yes.
very important that you work backwards from your availability date. Sometimes for enlisted, that could be your first day of your terminal leave. If you're a commissioned officer, chances are, depending on the company, if they're taking federal money, they may want to put you, just be a little safer so that you're not what's called double dipping, getting money from the government, aka their clients, and then
Yeah.
working for them. But there are companies that will put you in another capacity. SkillBridge is also another great way to get exposure to those companies. But timing, if I had my magic wand, it would be that everyone knew when to hit the apply button. And
Yes.
you've worked for big companies, just
Mhm.
like I have. I'm blown away when I see the faces of people when I stand in front of a TAPS or ETAPS class and say, I might get 1,000 people applying to my job. And that's
Yeah.
low. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hundreds of resumes that we have to look through for a job over the course of it being open 90 days. And those 100 could come in one day. So how are you differentiating yourself from that pack? Is it someone you know in the company? Is it a communication with the recruiter? And by the way, the recruiters are trying to fill jobs. If you're not ready to be employed, I highly suggest you don't make friends with them yet. They have to fill their seats. They have to fill those jobs. So
Yeah.
become friends with people who work there, who can be your champions and your advocates and your sponsors, and say, hey, Suzuki or Sue or Jane or Bob or Jim is great. I've been talking to him 6 months and he's getting out of the military. He's moving here. I think he'd be a great fit. Those type of recommendations coming out of the woodwork are so impactful.
Yeah.
But again, this takes time. This is not rounding the corner and saying, what do you got?
I have a lot of military people come up to me and say, this is when I'm being discharged, or this is when I'm leaving. When should I start applying? And that is really important. I do want to point out that if you are sticking to state, federal, or government jobs and the application has a date listed, you are okay to apply at any time until that date is posted. But if you are not applying to that and the application does not have a date posted, you really should try to apply within 2 weeks of the job being posted. But that's only if you can start within the next month or month and a half. If you are 3 months out, you might want to use that time to again start refreshing your network and adding those companies and seeing where you want to go. But if it does not have a start or end date on the application, you are more likely to be asked to start sooner rather than later, especially if it's a replacement.
This is all great information. I thank you so much. I'm thrilled that you said yes to this interview. You've given us some great information, and I know that folks are going to want to get a hold of you. So we primarily use LinkedIn. That's how we know each other. So why don't you tell the folks how they might, and there's a lot of people just listening, so they're not going to see your name at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead and
Mhm.
spell it out and give us some direction on how to find you.
Yes, so Brittney Swan, it's not spelled like the regular Brittany with an A. So it is Brittney, and last name is Swan, like the bird, Swan. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on swansresumes.com. My email is info@swansresumes.com, and that's swans with an S at the end. But reach out to me on LinkedIn, not like, hey, do you have anything for me? But if you have any just like quick questions of like, what's your thought on this or that? Like, I will definitely answer you. I also give out 10 free hours a week to educating military people. So if you set up a free 15-minute appointment, I could quickly go through with you some things on your resume for free. But if you want to do longer sessions, we can do that too. But I just want to make sure that everyone is not shooting themselves in the foot before they start walking on the path.
Yes. Oh, that's very important. Thank you so much, Brittany. It's been a real pleasure to have you in the expert segment of our show. And I know that a lot of folks are going to be reaching out to you, including myself. So thanks so much. I'm going to
Thank you.
wrap up this segment and let you know that the next segment is our 1+ year veteran. So somebody who's been in the workforce for about a year or more, but not more than 5. My name is Cheryl Cross. You're listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour, and we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Cheryl Cross. This is the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour, and we're at that part of the segment where we find people who are within their first or second or fourth year of transition. And today we have Josh Wines. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for telling us your story. Why don't you launch in and tell us where you're from and what your transition story is this far?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for the opportunity. So I'm kind of from nowhere and from a lot of different places. I grew up mainly in Texas, just south of Houston, but my dad was in the Navy, so we bounced around a lot. I got stationed in North Carolina for most of my career, but then we decided because we like cheese and we like the cold, we moved up here to Wisconsin. Just kidding. There's actually a lot of the veterans benefits actually, and just we just wanted a small town living. So we moved out here, so we live now about 45 minutes east of Minneapolis. And I got out last year. So I was out, good on retirement rules on 1 August of last year. I
Mm-hmm.
did just a little over 20 years, combination of enlisted and officer time, commissioned as an Army intel officer, and then switched over to PSYOP back in '08, and did that, so like I said, majority of my career. And so when I got out last year, I started looking around pretty aggressively for like internships and skill bridge and things like that. Probably as early as, let's say, September prior to that time getting out. So almost a full year out as I was preparing. And I looked around a whole bunch of different opportunities. I didn't kind of know what I wanted to do. I was kind of interested in marketing because I did that kind of sort of as as a PSYOP officer.
Mm.
And then I was interested in technology just because it's the fast pace, it's just innovative, and I really like that sort of stuff. And so I looked at those. I looked at project management because that seems to be oftentimes like hear people kind of like, here you go, be a project manager, right? You do that as
Right.
an officer or an NCO, right? Those roles. And so what I ended up sort of examining as I went through that was, okay, well, let me try to find a great company that could give me multiple opportunities. So I ended up really lucky. I got through networking, through a transition program, actually. It's called the Honor Foundation. It's for retiring or transitioning special operations folks. And I was put in contact with a company called NetApp. It's a cloud-based company. Really awesome. Really great folks. And I was able to become like a project manager, working for the chief of staff to like the VP of product marketing. So it was a tech company. It was project management. It was the marketing space. So I got exposure to a lot of those different things. And it was a lot of fun. It just wasn't like I just didn't get excited about, cloud-based services. People were awesome, really great culture. I can't speak more highly of the phenomenal leadership within the company and just the overall experience. But I wanted something a little bit more dynamic, and that's through additional networking, specifically the Special Operators Transition Foundation, another program that I participated in. Can't speak highly of either, more highly of either one of those for us, soft or retiring soft folks. But I was able to get into a company which I'm currently in, which is scale facilitation. Kind of an interesting role, and I started with them while actually I was on terminal leave, and so that was kind of intense. It was a remote job, so that's a bit of a blessing. But so I was in the process of doing the VA stuff. I had finished all those VA appointments prior to actually starting full time. Thank God, I was able to be really proactive with that, so I get benefits on discharge. But I still had to pick up my family and move during the summertime while also trying to work. It was a very turbulent, chaotic move. Let's put it that way. And but we were able to land a really great place and settle down here. And last year, just learned just an immense amount of stuff. The role I have allows me to touch pretty much all facets of the business, right? So I'm in an innovation space, so commercializing early stage technology, and so I'm working with really smart doctors and engineers and design folks. I'm talking to legal and compliance and IT, and I'm talking the marketing folks, and I'm building out business plans and all these different things, and sort of coming together and all that different stuff. And so a really great experience and so far. So that's kind of where I'm at up to this point. So.
Well, it sounds like you're really leading by passion and excitement. Are you special operators, you're always driven by the dopamine, aren't you?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, you said that you started this journey a little early. How far in advance of your transition did you start researching?
So I made the decision about a year out from when I was going to get out, right? So I've been toying with it. I've just been honestly, I just kind of tired of being gone from the family. And then when it was one day I just woke up, and to be honest, I didn't feel it anymore. I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for a new adventure. So it was about a year, maybe a little bit over. You know what I mean? And I dropped my paperwork. I had a really phenomenal boss who enabled me to focus on that. Sort of the deal was, come in and sort of pass over and provide some guidance and mentorship and sort of review and those sort of things. But I got really lucky. I didn't have to go to the grind working 10-hour days as a staff officer, like a lot of my peers end up doing. Some by choice, you know what I mean, but a lot of them because it's just they don't have another option. So I was able to dive full into it well before about a year and about 4 months before my actual retirement date.
So you were heavily networked in the Honor Foundation and the Special Operators Group. I think that's also on LinkedIn. I've seen them. I'm curious, how intentional were you in telling people what you wanted a year out? Did you know? Did you know you wanted to be in innovation space, or did that develop?
No, that definitely didn't. That didn't sort of come to mind. Like as I got in this current role, I knew I wanted to do something that enabled me to have to to work with people, right? I enjoy that aspect about it. I knew I wanted to have something where it's going to grow and build something. And what does that look like? Was that change management? Was that through business development and sales? Was that through customer success, or what it ended up being is in more in the innovation space. I just know that's kind of what I wanted, and those two programs did a lot. I mean, to be honest, like I tease some of my my buddies who are still in, and I who are in leadership positions. I say, hey, look at things like the Gallup strength. Like it's within schoolhouse, right? Special warfare school, they use MBTI, right, which is not a good assessment tool, right? I mean, it's not
There's
in
more
my
now.
opinion, right?
There's more.
But Gallup strength, like when I took that, and I took a couple other ones, right? It enabled had these things in front of me, and I thought through that process, and it really enabled me to kind of figure out, like, what it is, like, what I mean, how my thinking process, and it was so humbling, right? At that point in time, like, Amanda spent this entire professional career doing all this stuff, and I really didn't understand how my brain worked. And maybe other people would do a better job. Maybe I just wasn't as quite as introspective as I should have been. Don't know. But that really helped, that foundation of thinking through. And I can tell you, like, what, at least in the Gallup strengths, right? It resonates with me. It's learner, right? It's context. It's innovator, right? It's command. It's arranger. Or sorry, not innovator. It's ideation, right? And so it's So it's that learner, context, ideation, arranger, and command, right? Those sort of aspects, and it kind of pieced those through. I'm like, oh crap, yeah, this does make sense. But as I've gone out, what I mean, as I've kind of gone through, and I keep a little journal book, to kind of write down, like, what are the things I like and what are the things I don't like about my specific role. And I did that when I was in NetApp, and that's kind of when I was like, I don't want to be a project manager. Can I do project management? Absolutely. Almost
Yes.
every single leader within the military can do it, and they can do it backwards and forwards, right? Depending on what company it is, if it's an engineer, like I'm not an engineer, right? At all. My little brother is. He's a nuke sub engineer himself. He's brilliant, and he's got that mindset. Me, I like to paint with colors, right? You know what I mean? So, like, that's not quite, but I am very creative and I can make things happen. It's just that's not where my energy is derived from.
It sounds like you've really done a lot of soul searching, and that's not something I'm hearing a lot for folks who are refining the process of their first plus years out. And this is a sobering statistic, and Art Benke made me promise that I wouldn't say the word fail. So here's the stat: 78% of people going into their first jobs out of the military leave within the first year. So that's not necessarily a failure. Thank you, Art. But it means that, and as a workforce development consultant and HR consultant, somebody who's worked so hard as a corporate recruiter and retention and management, talent management specialist, those numbers hurt. I get a little tear in my eye when I see that amount of people are not making, and this is why this program and my book and all the things that I do are there. I want people to make better transition. And I feel really strongly that something you did and you talked about, be it Myers-Briggs, which is MBTI that you mentioned, be it Gallup, be it DISC, be it any of the I need to understand myself more tests that you can take, do them. Learn your Enneagram, learn your astrology sign. I don't care. Figure out what it is that motivates you, because corporations, be it an Amazon warehouse, be it a Fortune 20 company, they're all trying to make the best fit for you so you live there the longest. And if you don't work well, either it was bad decision making on your part, sorry, not failure, but just not the right decision, bad company not keeping you, not being able to retain you, or, inflation, reorganization, people are getting laid off. It depends on what the economy looks like and how reorganizations are happening due to labor insufficiencies. So there's all these factors, but knowing yourself is probably the most valuable thing that you're bringing to the context here, Josh. I thank you so much for bringing that up, because I didn't even think about that when we did our pre-talk. Another thing you said, and I want you to talk about this. So your former boss gave you it has to do with horses. Can you tell us what you're talking about and what she said to you and how you've moved that into knowing yourself more?
Yeah, so I had a boss, a lover, one of the greatest bosses I've ever had, right? And we had this conversation, and I can't remember how it was, but basically she said like, Josh, you're a workhorse, not a show horse, and I'm sure as heck I ain't gonna put you on parade. She used profanity in there too, but at the end of the day, and she's right, right? At first I was like, man, that whatever. Like my first
That
initial
hurt.
instinct was yeah, I was like, basically, get bent, right? But she wasn't using it as an insult, right? She was saying like, look, for me, and this is just my personality, right? Is I work hard, right? I don't ask for recognition. I just work hard. I put my head down, and I just and this has been my career has been I work well over the number of hours that the other people have seen. And I would see that, right? I would see people go home 10 hours. I mean, like work 10 hours each less a week than I was working, and it wasn't like here to look at me, look what I can do. It was no, things just need to be done, right?
Yeah.
And I just did them. And I just never, I never went to the additional events. I never did the networking, which it's is once again, it's still something I fail to do even now. I don't network very well. Not that because I love working with people, I love talking to people. It's just it just not doesn't come naturally to me. That sort of
Right.
stuff. I'm here to I feel like I help, and you ask me for help, I'm going to help. I'm not going to even bat an eye. I'll help. And so that was just kind of it's something that kind of stuck with me, and I kind of have to in the back of my mind go, okay, you don't want to do this, but you need to do it anyways, right? And it just sort of it feels unnatural. Let's put it that way.
You bring up an excellent point, though, and I say this because I'm at a certain age and I have children, a child, and it's not about everyone being the same. As my late mother would say, it would be a really noisy place. If you are not comfortable being let's just say introvert, extrovert, and ambivert. So extrovert is I'm an extrovert. I love going into groups of people. I get a great energy from interacting. I come home. It takes me a day or so to recover. So I may be more on the middle scale, but introverts are not challenged. They are very challenged by those environments. They are more one-on-one or small group, and they will open up. And although they are great observers, and you see a lot of these folks in the human intelligence worlds because that's their strength. But understanding your strength is what we're talking about. And you've done some great housekeeping on that. One of the things I want to bring up is you got feedback from someone you trust. And that's really hard to get. And it probably wasn't asked for. I don't think you walked up to your commander and said, ma'am, would you please give me a full 360 just in like the next 5 seconds? If you could put me in one sentence, what would it be? That's tough. So start with yourself. Really, I think behavior tests, they're all online. You can do them free. And even the ones that are not paid, they're not that expensive, under $20. There's some more elaborate ones you can do. Gallup is very elaborate. Hogan is another. So just go out and find what makes you tick. But the whole goal of this is not to label you. It's not. It's to understand who you are so that you can better represent yourself. So perfect example. There are times, especially before the pandemic, people are like, can you go to this event? Could you do this? Can you do that? And I was getting a little burned out, to be quite frank. And I said, you know what? That's just too many people for me. And they looked at me like I had 3 heads. But you love going to these things. I said, I do. But I have learned that I have limits and that I will not be useful for any of us. If I need to go home, I need to put me somewhere else. Took a lot of courage, and I really felt badly about that. And I'm no stranger to asking for what I want. I teach people how to do it, but it's tough. And it's really tough as you're looking because you're working in a new environment in the civilian world. I think people are wanting to please. You become people pleasers. I'll do that. I can do that. That's every military person I've ever interviewed. Oh, I can do that. And you can. But do you want to? And do we want to keep you past that first year? Despite reorganizations? Do we want you to grow in careers? Yes, that is the goal. That is the goal. Thanks for letting me unpack that a little bit. You have mentioned 2 foundations. And who brought you to the great state of Wisconsin? I'm curious.
An organization called Mission Wisconsin. So when I was doing the guy who runs it is called Steve Yonke. It's not how you would think it's spelled, but At least not for me because I'm not from this region. I guess it's a pretty common name up here. But so I was looking at different states to go, and when I get out, and one of the criteria was financial, right? So maximizing my benefits, right? And so I'm originally from Texas, so really, really great benefits there too. But I didn't know what my disability rating was going to be. And so when I was looking across, Wisconsin has it if you either join the military from Wisconsin and you're 30% disabled, your spouse, yourself, your children you don't have to pay any tuition to any sort of higher education in the state. If you haven't joined from the state of Wisconsin, you have 5 years after residency, and then your children get the same benefits. Also, if you're 100% disabled after 5 years, you don't have to pay. You pay property tax, but you get it reimbursed from the state. Or if you joined, you do the same thing. It's immediate, right? And so when I was looking at these benefits, like I didn't have any clue what I was going to get, but I knew for a fact I was at least 30% based upon some of the sort of the boo boos and things like that I got over the years. So I was like, okay, cool. This is an opportunity. It's like an additional $30,000 per kid, right? I've got 4 kids that were still in the house. I actually have 6 total. 2 are grown men. They actually joined the military themselves. Both were in the Army, despite my encouraging them to go in the Air Force. But no, that's just kidding. But that's a completely different dynamic. But I was like, okay, this is the benefit. And so yeah, Steve did a phenomenal job. I did try to land a couple of jobs out here in Wisconsin. It just either wasn't the right fit. I wasn't the right fit for them, or they were the right fit for me. But he did, regardless, help line me up, figure out where I wanted to go, and which was Western Wisconsin. I'm in the far western part of the state. It's called the Driftless area. It's absolutely gorgeous. The people out here are super helpful. He lined me up with veteran support organizations, the whole nine. And so it's been a really smooth transition. So he doesn't just job placement. It's everything placement. It's come on to this great state of Wisconsin. Eventually, maybe I'll get used to the way folks talk up here. But they sure as heck aren't used to the way I talk. I can tell you that. So.
Well, at least they're friendly about it, right?
Yeah,
Steve
they are.
Yankee is not only a supporter of the show, but helped me craft the idea for the show. He was featured on our first episode. You can
Oh, wow.
check him out at his new company is called Semper Forward. And Mission, Wisconsin, you can certainly find him from that too. Well, I just want to say thank you. I knew when we first originally talked, you would be an excellent just a great source of information. Your story is not unlike others, but it needs to be told. And that is our mission here. Just to remind you folks listening, Civilian Mission is the 3-year guide to military professionals planning civilian careers. That is my book. And all of those things are in the links are in the comments. So thanks, Josh, for being on the show. And I'm very curious to see where you go. You mentioned over and over again that you wanted to help others because so many people had been helpful to you. Why don't you, for the folks that are listening and not watching, go ahead and spell your name and tell us how we can get in touch with you. Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, first name Josh. So hopped on there. Might come up Joshua, and the last name is Wines, like you drink, Wines. I'm pretty sure there's not too many Wineses floating around out in country. Period. But yeah, hop on LinkedIn. If it's not immediate obvious there, you can always find that previous company, U.S. Army, you know what I mean, sort of thing. You can find me and feel free to reach out, and I'd love to give you any advice or any sort of direction, or just hey, look, these are the sort of things that I use. Maybe it can help somebody. And if it can't, what I mean, worst case scenario, somebody has a new connection. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your help today. Before we go on to the next segment, I just want to thank you all for listening. This is the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. I'm your host, Cheryl Cross. Our next segment will be someone just like Josh, but with a little bit more time under their belt, and they'll talk about their transition story. Thanks, Josh. We'll hopefully be checking in with you another time.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
We're rolling through the last part of our segment for the show, and it is, I think, one of the most powerful ones because I introduce people who have been out of the military at least 5 years, but not so long that they have forgotten and not so long that they can't recall the suck the soup, all the things that all of the other folks have been transitioning through in the hour. So it is an honor for me to introduce to you a U.S. Army veteran. He got out in 2017, Sergeant First Class, Matt Wood. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining
Hi,
me.
Cheryl. Thanks for having me.
You are on the podcast circuit. I found you through someone else's, was it Holding Down the Fort? I was listening to you talk, and you're full of stories. You and I, we have a lot of parallels. We're both human capital people, which is like watching paint dry. We won't talk about that. But
Right.
you're here to talk about your transition story. Why don't you start and just lay it out? What was it like back in 2017?
I was a senior drill sergeant at what is now Fort Moore, Georgia. And I got sent out there at 19 years. And I said, "Are you kidding me? You're sending me to be a drill sergeant at 19 years in the Army. You realize I'm like inches away from retirement." But obviously, the Army works in wonderful and mysterious ways. So that's what I ended up doing. I got there. I did my first year on the trail as a drill sergeant. Um, it was a little more fun than I was expecting. It was a lot of challenge, but I hit a point after I crossed the 20-year mark and I said, all right, I'm really broken down right now. I've been beat up as an infantryman for 2 decades, probably going back to another unit. The word was I was going to go to an armor unit or heavy infantry unit. And I was like, I've spent my entire career light. I don't want to do that. So I went and asked the strength manager there at Fort Moore, and he said, "Well, you know, how much time have you got?" I said, "Well, I'm at 20. I'm over 20 right now. Do I have to do my full 2 years here?" So he said, "No, you can. You're over 20. You can retire anytime you want." I said, "Great." So I went back to my unit, drew up my paperwork, went in, dropped them off with my commander, and they said, "All right, cool, not a problem. We totally get it, and we're going to make this easier for you. We're going to send you over to the replacement battalion, and you'll get to ride off the rest of your time in the Army there." So I went to 30th AG Battalion and at the replacement, had a fantastic first sergeant and company commander there who were super supportive. Um, they say, "Hey, you get whatever you need to get done. You're on your way out. You've given a lot. Totally support you." So um, in that regard, it was fantastic. The classes that I went through were very ho hum. They It was tough because I didn't feel like there was really any personalization to any of it. And I get it; they're going through hundreds of people every year that are processing out, but to come in and tell people, and I was in the senior leader course for it, and they said, "Hey, y'all are here. You're senior leaders in the Army. You should expect to be getting out and be, walking to CEO jobs at 70, 80, $100,000 a year, easy." And I went home and I talked to my wife about this. And at the time, my wife was working for a nonprofit that helped transitioning service members.
Perfect.
And yeah, which is great because she's like, "Yeah, that's complete garbage." I,
I wasn't going to laugh
that's
out loud when you said it, but yes, it is.
yeah. I was like that. And I think I was fortunate in that I knew that when they said that. I was like, that's ridiculous because I didn't have a degree. I didn't have all this stuff that they kept talking about as oh, you're a senior leader, it should be easy for you to walk into these. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can lead and manage people. That's not a problem. But I was like, I'm an infantry guy. What other than kicking doors in and shooting things and falling out of airplanes, what am I going to offer a company that that they're going to need?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to go into law enforcement. I didn't want to go into private security. Um, I have no problem with anybody that wants to do that. It just that was not where I wanted to go. So I talked with my wife. I talked with my wife's boss, and both of them were like, "Hey, yeah, you've got so much more. You you worked at an embassy. You were a leadership academy instructor. You were a drill sergeant. You were a recruiter. bing, bang, bang, all these things that they started listing off. And they're like, all these soft skills that you're bringing out are what they're looking for, what companies are looking for. I said, okay, but you know, the TAP class was like, oh, you have to have a resume, and you have to, one of the things that you have to do is you have to show it to one of the counselors as you're processing out.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, here's your appointment. It's a 30-minute block. That's all you've got to sit with this counselor and show them. And I walk in, I talk to the guy, and no point did he even ask to see a resume. He says, so why do I have a resume? Why did I do one for this class? I totally didn't get it. I didn't know the first thing about networking. I didn't know the first thing about LinkedIn or interviews. I mean, the last thing I did close to an interview was a promotion board almost 20 years earlier. I was like, this is crazy. So I got fortunate in that I had that support system there with the company my wife was working for and her. So with their assistance, I got a resume put together that looked somewhat decent and took all these things that I'd done in the background and kind of brought them forward and said, okay, yeah, you managed this, you did this, you were doing these things. I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now it feels a little more comfortable. But I still didn't know. I was like, if I'm applying for jobs, who am I going to apply to? Where are we going to go? Um, we thought we had kind of narrowed it down. We said, all right, we're going to go to either one of two places. We're either going to Texas or we're going to Florida. And I'm originally from New Hampshire, so I've never paid state income taxes. And I was like, I don't want to ever pay state income taxes. So we got to find a place that doesn't do that. And that's why we said, these are two great locations for it. So we were in Florida on vacation, um, going to the really big theme park that's here in Central Florida that I'm sure everybody knows about. It's real famous around the world. Um, and my wife said, it'd be kind of cool if you had a job here.
Free
And this was,
passes for
yeah,
the family.
yeah. I mean, the benefits to that are fantastic. So um, this was November of 16. I said, okay, but I can't really apply for anything right now, even though I'm under a year left in the Army. I was getting out in June of 17. I said, okay, well, if I apply for anything now, nobody's going to want to hire me because I've got so much time left. So I looked and said, okay, well, January I'll start looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking on career sites and hearing stuff in Central Florida. I'm applying for jobs. I finally found one that I was like, okay, well, here's an interesting job. It kind of fits. It's a sales job. I was a recruiter. If I could sell the Army, I should be able to sell whatever they're offering. And so I got the advice, reach out to somebody in this organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went on LinkedIn. I was like, who works here? As I look back on it now, they just had a profile. They weren't doing anything with it. Now I know if I look and I'm like, oh yeah, they posted something the last week or the last
Right.
month or whatever. Those are the people I would start reaching out to now. So I reached out to this woman. She said, yeah, absolutely. Um, here's this job. This is what it does. Uh, when you apply for it, send me your resume. I'll pass it on to the hiring lead. I said, awesome.
Great.
So I did that. And that was probably March or so. And they said, hey, we want you to come down and do a job interview. Great. Super. I'll come do an interview. Came down here to Florida, and I've been more calm in firefights than I had been going into this job interview. I was like shaking. I was
Wow.
so nervous. But I went in there, and it was just two people, and I answered their questions to what I felt was the best of my ability. I get a call later from the recruiter who says, "Hey, you did okay. We'd like you to come in and start training, but we want you to start in think she said in April. So I can't do April. I'm still on active duty. I won't have the ability to do that until maybe May at the earliest. But April I can't do. So okay, well we have to withdraw you from this application. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, about a month later, I get another email. I'm still keeping in contact with people, and they say, "Yeah, role's coming back up. Reapply." So I did. I get the call. They say, "Yeah, we want you to come back down and do an interview." Well, I came back down, and the first interview was just two people, two of the managers. This time I come back in. Hey, you're going into this room over here, and there's three people. Okay, cool. One more, no big deal. I went in this time with a different mindset. I wasn't as nervous about it. I said, okay, I have the job already. And I approached it as I have this job already. This is just an obstacle I need to get over to get there. So um, I went in, did the interview with those three people, and then they said, "Hey, have you met the rest of the leadership team?" No. Oh, let's walk you across the hall. Introduce you to these other people. I walk into the hall, walk into this next room, and there's four people. And I thought, okay, yeah, it's kind of the meet and greet part. Well, no, this was part B of the interview. Oh, okay. I have to do a whole nother interview piece.
And you
So
weren't told this? You didn't?
no,
Oh, okay.
I had no idea. Um,
I
so
hope you
I
ate. I hope you brought water.
no, well, no, and I had no idea. It was like it
Mm.
became such a long process. So um, I got into the second room. I answered their questions, um, and I left. And as I'm getting walked out, one of the senior managers asked me if I'd found a house or anything because he knew I'd come down from Georgia. He said, "No, we're still looking around." He said, "Well, if you take our location and you funnel upwards, everything in that area, good to go." So that's how we started looking for a house. Um, and our
Without a
initial
job,
plan,
without a job
yeah,
offer?
right,
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
not at least not from this company. I got a job offer from another company that I
Okay.
wasn't 100% set on, but they'd offer me a position. And they kind of came in, and I look back on it, and they offered me 45,000, and I was like, okay, that I guess that's all right to start with. Um, but I've been doing so much research on LinkedIn. I found this guy who had written something about salary negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, but this is great because I've never had to do this before.
Right.
So how do I negotiate? And I read that, and I said, this is fantastic. So I drafted up a counteroffer letter and sent it to that other company. Oh,
Good. Good job.
okay. And then they were surprised because they're like, you're asking for 55,000. I said, yeah, which is actually a pay cut from what I was making in the military. And and that's where it kind of got interesting because the president of that company was former military, but he was not. I mean, he was an officer, but I was like, how do you not know how much somebody in the military is making? I mean, it's public knowledge. It's not like it's a huge secret. All you have to do is Google military pay, and it's right there. Um, so I was like, yeah, it's coming in at 55. You're making me lose about $17,000. But I get that this is an entry level supervisor position, so I'm okay with that. I can work with that. Well, then this other Mickey Mouse company comes back to me and says, "Hey, we want to offer you a job." And I said, "Okay, well, that sounds pretty good. What are they doing?" And they said, "Okay, well, here's the deal. You have to come back down here by this date to um, do all the paperwork and everything to get into our systems." And I had housing, I had transportation coming to pick up all my household goods and everything. And I said, "Well, that's going to be tough. I got movers coming." Well, if you're not here by this day, the job's gone. So let me call you back. Call my wife at work. I said, "Hey, here's the deal. The offer's there. This is what they're going to be paying me. Um, it's hourly plus commission, but they need me to come down to Florida like on this day. Said, well, do you want to do that? Said, yeah, it'd be really cool. I get to go work for this company. Okay, we'll figure it out. So uh, call the recruiter back, said, yep, absolutely, I'm coming. I'll be there. Um, and the day came up. I was up super early because I was going to drive straight down here. So 7 hour drive, get down here by 11 o'clock in the morning, um, go through all the paperwork, and then realize, oh, I needed my social security card, which I don't have. It's up in Georgia. Well, you got to go down if you go over here in Orlando, there's the social security place.
Oh,
You can get a, I mean, like nothing had been relayed to me, and I
this is
had no idea what I
painful.
needed.
This is
Oh yeah,
painful. Okay.
yeah. So I go over, I spend like an hour at the social security office. I get a printout, says, yes, this is my social security number. I bring it back to um, the HR office there. They take everything. I get fingerprinted. I do all the stuff, and they say, "Yep, cool, you're good. Your training starts on uh, like the 3rd of June." And this is May. I said, "Okay, great. I can do that. I just need to find a house now." so, so we've been. Our initial thought was, okay, we'll rent a house for a year and then buy a house. We find a place that we like. Then the more I thought about it, it's like, well, Uncle Sam is going to move us this last time. If we move again, it's on our dime. Let's buy a house first. So within 3 or 4 days, we found a place, made an offer,
Wow.
and got a house. Um, I, not the ideal way to do it. Absolutely not what I would recommend to anybody now. But that's what I did. Um, and so I was on terminal leave, my last 30 days of terminal leave in June, and started working for this company doing their initial training and everything else for this new job. But the job itself, where made my transition difficult, was it was a very solitary job. I was in a sales role. I usually didn't work with anybody else. If I did, it was for maybe 4 hours out of the day. I was the only person from my organization that would be in the cafeterias or whatever, eating my lunch. So it was very solitary. And I didn't have a whole lot of people that I could relate to. Didn't have a whole lot of commonality in the people I worked with as far as their backgrounds. I mean, I, I, I felt like, hey, I've just come from this really high operational tempo environment. And now I'm going to something where if you're not feeling well, all you have to do is go on this app and say that you're not going to come in today. Really? That's it? Okay. I've never been like this before in my life. Um, so it was a huge shock for that. And then it just, I, I had issues with the the leadership that I worked for. Like I tried to explain, hey, I'm not getting this. Something is not clicking. What do I need to do? And they said, okay, we're going to pair you up with this other person who's been doing this for a couple of years. Well, this guy came over. He's like, hey, just get people in there. All you're doing is your whole role in life is to get people to go to this open house, and I don't care how you do it. And I struggle with it because I'm like, this is kind of going against my values, my ethics. I can't like I can't send garbage to this, even though it's going to pay me more.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work for me. And he came out, he's like, well, you just need to get over that. No, that's not going to happen there, Sparky.
Something called an honor code. Have you ever heard it? Yeah. No.
Yeah. So I said, okay, I can't do that. And then I had to go to the VA for something to do with my an ankle injury, my shins and stuff. And they said, hey, we're going to put you in a big boot. Great. That'll be fun. And I came back to work and I told them, hey, look, I'm in this boot and it's going to make it real difficult for me to walk to locations that are, maybe a mile away. Oh, well, we're just going to put you on 8 weeks of medical leave. Oh, okay. Which I didn't get paid for because I didn't have enough time with the company.
Oof.
So, yeah, I can see the face too. I was like, so they do this, and I come back from the 8 weeks. I said, okay, I'm fortunate. I have military retirement that's still paying me. I have, at the time, I was a 60% rated from the VA. So I was like, okay, I at least have something coming in. My wife was still working. So it was like, okay, we're okay. If I'm not getting paid from this company, it's not going to be the end of the world. But I come back and at this point, I was still so just disheartened, disenfranchised with the entire job. Like there were days I would come into work and it was like, man, I'd give anything to go put a uniform back on and go out in the woods again. I wanted nothing to do with this. I thought, hey, this is supposed to be this great place to work. It's supposed to be this great environment. And I'm just not feeling that. It didn't fit. It was not a culture fit for me. It was not a personality fit or anything. I just had a really, really tough time with it. Instead of, I need to find something that's going to give me that sense of purpose, which is what I was missing with this job. I was fortunate that a contact of mine, who I had helped out a little bit, and coincidentally had come from Hawaii, had been stationed out there and then retired and then come to work here in Florida for the same company, just in a different segment. I said, hey, you need to talk to this person. So I reached out to this individual and he said, yeah, hey, this is what you got to do. Come apply for this job. It's an internship. So you need to, enroll in some college classes, but it'll get you in over here and that can start opening doors for you. So it actually got me back into the company again, just in that other segment, which was night and day from what I'd experienced over the last year. Very welcoming, very supportive.
Good.
A lot of what I had expected of the company originally, I was seeing at this point. And I said, how can I stay here? I want to do this. But that's where I started learning more about how to network. I was reaching out to people. I was doing informational interviews, but I still had that nagging piece in the back of my head, like I don't have a sense of purpose. They're giving me tasks to do, and I'm knocking them out. And I turn them in. And I'm like, hey, I've got all this information you wanted, like 5 days before you wanted it. Now what? We don't have anything else for you. Okay. Well, what do I do? I don't know. Find something. Great. Okay. So you're going to pay me to find something to do. But it gave me that opportunity to do those informational interviews, and I would talk to people, and I found another role. And right about that point was when I finally mentally hit the transition phase of, I know I'm never going to get called back to the Army. It's never going to happen. Because they had put out, I think in 2020, that something come out from the Army saying, hey, we're looking for former drill sergeants to come back. I was like,
Right.
yeah, take me. I'm right here. Take me back. And I think I was even having dreams about going back. I mean, it
Wow.
was that bad. That's the point of the transition. I was like, this is just, I was not happy. So, but I hit that point where I'm like, okay, they're not going to call me. I get it. I've been out. I've got a re-entry code that's not going to let me come back in. No big deal. But I finally processed all that and said, okay, I'm done. I'll never be a soldier again. I will always be a former soldier, or as I like to call myself now, a former military professional. So COVID comes, 95% of the team that I'm working with is furloughed. 5 of us, myself included, were kept on to continue working. In June of 2020, people start coming back. So we were part of the process of bringing them all back. But then we realized that this one segment of the company out in California still wasn't doing anything. They hadn't reopened, and they were still. So the company was saying, "Hey, because this segment isn't open, um, some of our stuff in Asia isn't open. We're going to have to do layoffs, and we're going to lay off 28,000 people." So that's a lot. that's huge, and that's just from here in Florida. A friend of mine that I was working with said, "Hey, if you don't get a call by 9 o'clock tonight, you're safe because they can't call you after 9 p.m." Okay, cool. So this is Thursday. 9 o'clock comes and goes. Yeah, sweet. I get to go to work tomorrow. Cool. Friday, I'm at a VA appointment. I get a call from somebody I don't know. I don't answer it. I get a text message. "Hey, this is so and so. I need to talk to you. I'm in an appointment. I'll call you when I'm done, or I'll let you know when I'm done." I get done with my appointment. I'm on my way out, headed home, and I said, "Hey, I'm out of the appointment. You're free to call me." Within 5 minutes, I get a call. "This is so and so, and I've got this other person from our HR business partner on the line with me." Uh, okay, so this is that call.
Yep.
And sure enough, it's, "Hey, your role's been eliminated. When you get home, don't do any work. Don't even turn on your computer." Okay.
Just return it to us.
Yeah.
And by the
Yeah.
way, can I ask you some questions? Because that's called an exit interview. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't even get an exit interview. It was just, "Hey, don't turn on your computer. Don't do anything. We're going to keep you on active status until December," because this was like the beginning of October. "You're on active status until December 4th, but don't do any work. And have a nice day." I'd already been looking for other jobs because there wasn't any growth potential for me there. So all right, fine.
2020. That was such a weird time. That's
Yeah.
when the workforce really started not coming back to work.
Yep.
2021, we really saw it, but 2020 that was the rally cry, man. Us folks in workforce development, we were all, "Hey, just FYI, your company's going to go through a huge reorganization. When the back to work comes back, people aren't going to come back to work." So
Yep.
you got ahead of it, and you were part of those big shifts in corporations, in big companies. That's a lot of people. Wow.
Yeah.
Continue your story. I have some questions, but I'll wait.
Yeah. So I came home and initially thought I wasn't going to be able to go trick or treating with my kids on Halloween. But I walked in the door, said, "Hey, honey, I'm home. You know how we were talking about I was going to be working on Halloween? I'm going trick or treating with the kids." "What do you mean?" "I got laid off."
Oh,
"What?"
oh.
So,
"Hi, honey, I'm home. I don't have a
yeah,
job." That's awful.
just got laid off on my way back from the VA. So, no big deal. But we took it in stride. We said, "Hey, we're okay. We had her income. We still had my retirement, what I was getting from the VA, which actually ended up like the following year, my rating got increased, and like, okay, we're all right now." But that was the point where I said, "All right, I need to figure out what I'm going to do next. How am I going to, do something? I can't sit around the house and not do anything. I, I'm I'm just not that kind of person." And the more companies I was applying to, the more I was realizing that they were, even though I was meeting like 90% of the criteria that they were looking for, because I didn't have a college degree, they wouldn't touch me. And I was getting so frustrated with that, so angry. But I had a conversation with my neighbor who's also a military retiree. And he was talking about problems that his company was having hiring veterans, and they thought they were getting people with leadership experience. They were hiring people that just did, their initial entry time, 3-4 years, and got out and didn't have a lot of that experience that these companies were hoping they would have. And that's when like the light bulb went on. It's like, oh, now I know what I'm going to do. And it revolved, it evolved from a question that I ask every transitioning service member now, and I ask my kids this: it's, what problem do you want to solve? And that's where I was like, that's it. I've found the problem I want to solve, but the only way I'm going to do that is if I start a company. And that's what led me to start Suit and Green Consultant, my company, is to bridge a knowledge gap. There's so many companies out there that are doing the resume stuff. They're doing the interview, the LinkedIn, but there's like nobody that's really focused on the emotional and mental aspects of transitioning out of the military into whatever's next. So I got to pilot her program, and it opened my eyes to all the stuff that I had like just powered through for the first year and a half of my transition out of the military. And I was like, oh yeah, you're talking about the stages of grief. Oh yeah, I remember when I went through this stage and this stage and this stage. And it was eye opening. And so that's another thing I talked to about with people transitioning. I was like, you need to prepare yourself. You are going to experience all these different stages of grief. Some may be stronger than others, but you're going to go through them, because I certainly did, like massively at times, where, I went down some very dark places, but because of the support I had at home, I came back from a lot of that. And I realized, okay, without understanding all that aspect, that's why we start seeing statistics.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things that I try to talk to people about as they're making that transition, is be prepared. Life out here is great, but it is not like what you were used to.
Since you're working on the emotional side and the grieving process, how might you foster resilience on one of your clients, to run in a field with no fences?
So if you're coming to work for, or even just trying to find a company to work for, and you're going through that transition process, and you find somebody that you can talk to and that you've connected with, ask them questions like, hey, what is, for lack of a better term, what are my left and right limits here? What can I do and what can't I do? If I have a problem with something, who do I go to? And because they're so used to being told you're going here, you either have 3 choices of where to go or none at all. And you're going to go do this, and you're going to make this happen, and you have no choice but to make it happen. They're so used to that, to take that away from them and say, hey, if you don't want to come to work today, just go on this app and say, hey, I'm not coming to work today. That's new. They don't understand that. It's very foreign. And I think that was one of the other things that I had difficulty wrapping my head around, was if I'm not happy here and I don't want to be here, I don't have to be here.
Mm.
I can quit.
Choice.
The choice to quit and leave was so strange. Like, no, I got to stay here. I got to power through it. And eventually it'll work in my favor, and I'll end up in the right place. It doesn't. I mean, in the military, it's like, okay, yeah, you've got 2 years, 3 years at a location, and then, it may have sucked, but you're going to get orders and you're going to move somewhere else, and you're going to get a new command. And that's, I dealt with that as a recruiter. Man, this is the longest 35 months, 2 weeks of my life. But I knew it was coming to an end, and I got to go somewhere else. In the civilian world, if you don't like a job,
You leave.
you leave. Go find a new one. Find a problem to solve.
Create your own company.
Yeah,
Like-
exactly.
Like Suit and Green.
Leaving the military is like going through a really, really bad divorce. You get done, that other side wants absolutely nothing to do with you anymore. And it can be really tough because you as a serviceman are like, man, I loved being in the military. I loved being a soldier. It was like the greatest thing I could have done for 21 years of my life. But as soon as I left, it they wanted nothing to do with me. And I'm like, that was hard to wrap my head around. I'm like, but I gave so much to you. You want nothing to do. But it's hard when, especially the people that serve for 10 or more years, you're used to that. You're used to the support network. You're used to the camaraderie, the tribe, and the family that you build there. And I think for people that do the 20 years and more, it can be a lot harder because we're so used to, hey, I walk into a room and I don't have to command attention or anything. People can see me and they see the rank on my chest. They know, okay, yeah, you're whatever. But at no point when I got out of the military did I ever come in and be like, oh yeah, I should be. I don't. I've never had any rank or anything attached to my email signature block. Like I've seen other retirees do, like, oh, I was Colonel so and so, U.S. Army retired. Great, you're Bob from Detroit right now, so super. But getting to realize the fact that your authority, your everything that you were every time you looked in the mirror while you were wearing a uniform is gone. Um, the person is still there, but that persona that you had is completely gone, and you'll never get that back. Um, it's tough, and that's why it's like that really horrible, messy divorce or Stockholm syndrome. I mean, we're so used to getting everything. Hey, here, wear this uniform. Be here at this time. You're going to go do this and everything else, and everything's taken care of for you. And then you leave, and you're like, I have a choice in what I wear. I have a choice in where I want to live. I have a choice in what I want to do. I want to go back. Let me go back. I want to go back to that safety blanket I had that was camouflage and I could wrap myself in it. And you can't. Um, and that's what makes it difficult.
Well, thank you so much. Matt, you're full of stories. I want to have you back. I know that you and I were going to be sitting on a panel at some point or on another podcast. But your story is so important because you're the first person, at least so far on the podcast, that's talked about the grief process. And I want to thank you because later today, I'm interviewing someone who rowed across the Atlantic Ocean to bring awareness for a friend who committed suicide. And PTSD and the after effects and how it doesn't go away. So grief on top of other issues, other health concerns, compounds and fractures people. So it's very important what you're saying. Keep saying it. I'm proud to give you a voice just for this few minutes that we had together. And I look forward to having you back. Before we say goodbye, is there any last alibis? And would you tell people how to get a hold of you?
Well, going with the PTSD thing, it's something I tell companies nowadays. They talk about the term veteran, meaning it typically gets associated with being broken. Even broken crayons can still color. And I hope that opens some eyes for some companies out there when they hesitate on hiring from the military community. But as far as being able to reach me, I'm on LinkedIn, Matt F. Wood on LinkedIn, or connect with me through my company website at suitinggreen.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to close out the show. I'm going to take a brief break and then say a goodbye. But I just want to say thank you, Matt. Your story is very powerful, as all of the stories are on the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. My name is Cheryl Cross, and on behalf of both Matt and I'd like to say goodbye. I cannot believe that we're already at episode 8, and it's because of you. Thank you for all of you who are liking, viewing, subscribing to the channel, and for those of you who are sharing. We are getting the word out, and my goal is to bring the voices of over 100 people who are transitioning either through the military to civilian transition or those who are looking to hit the reset button. Thanks so much. This is episode 8, and so far we've brought 24 people to the fore, and in the next year we'll certainly hit that 100. Thanks to David Katz, who talked about his In the Soup experience, and then our expert Brittney Swan, an outstanding recruiter and a great resume coach. Josh Wines was our 1+ year guy who talked about going to a certain location and certainly some of the challenges he's facing, but I know that he'll be back in the marketplace soon. Matt Wood shared his 5+ years of being out of the military and how he's giving back through suiting green. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Cheryl Cross, and before we say goodbye, I just want to remind you how I always say goodbye to you, which is very important. Write it down. You are strong, you are brave, you are skilled, and you are trained. These are all things that the military has taught you and that the civilian workforce needs. I'm rooting for you. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Post-production for this episode is done with care by oceantreecreative.com.